Thank you for coming today. Some of you know me, I'm Sean Kennedy. I'm a second-year doctoral student in the PhD program in English here at the Graduate Center. And I'm the organizer of the Critical Diversities and the Akemi Fun Practice Series, of which Akemi's talk today is a part. In addition to thanking you all for coming, which I'm doing again right now, thank you. I want to thank CUNY's Diversity Projects Development Fund and the Doctoral Students Council here at the Graduate Center for their generous support. I also want to thank the following co-sponsors of the CUNY Disability Studies Program of the CUNY School of Professional Studies and the Women of Color Network and the Feminist Studies Group of the Graduate Center. So 2 more paragraphs I'm going to read for my introduction. The Critical Diversities and in the Akemi Thought and Practice series is animated by 2 overarching questions. 1, how can we meet the critical need for diversities in higher education? And 2, how does this need impact the work we do as scholars and practitioners or activists? Given these questions, you can clearly see why I wanted Akemi to be one of the speakers. And why I'm so glad she's here today. In both her scholarship and her organizing, she's fully committed to diversifying higher ed around disability issues and countering ableism in all its forms. I've personally learned from her in just our email exchanges of the last few weeks, and I'm excited to learn even more today in her talk entitled Publish or Perish, Critique of the Neoliberal Academy for Disability Studies, which I think is just an excellent title. Anything of neoliberal. Akemi is a PhD candidate in critical social personality psychology here at the Graduate Center, an adjunct lecturer in the Disability Studies program at the CUNY School of Professional Studies, and a member of both the CUNY Coalition for Students with Disabilities and the National Disability Justice Collective. It gives me great pleasure to welcome her, and I hope you'll ask her questions, and I hope that actually all of us will engage in discussion after her talk. So thanks again, Akemi, for being
here. Can I ask your name? Because maybe go around with name.
Sure.
Yeah, is that all right?
Yeah.
I'm Rachel. I'm 6th year in the Critical Social Psychology PhD program.
I'm Steph. I'm in Akemi's year in the Critical Social Personality Psychology program.
I'm Sonia. I'm in the same program, but this is my 2nd year.
I'm Ali Lara, a postdoctoral researcher in Sociology department.
I'm Deborah, and I'm in the English department.
I'm Patrick, and I'm also in Critical Social Psych.
I'm Trina, and I am not at CUNY. I'm his partner, but I am a translator who specializes in academic research in the social sciences.
And I'm a postdoctoral researcher too at the Center for the Study of Women in Society.
Great.
Alexander, yeah.
Alexander.
I don't know if I.
I'm Sharona. I'm a doctoral student, almost finishing in 2 months, at the CUNY Study in Literature.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, so I'm very nervous, and my talk today is kind of all over the place. That's just who I am. So it's kind of drafty, but my hope is that my talk would spark some thinking and start conversations. I want it to be a conversation starter for among us and outside of this talk. So thank you, Sean, for organizing this, and thank you for your labor. I was thinking, as I planned for this talk, I was thinking like how much pre-work maybe it went that you put to start such a speaker series, which is very important and needed in academia at the CUNY at this time. And also I'm very struck or impressed by how this talk was organized in such a speedy manner and smooth way. And it might not be so much, you did a lot of work, of course, but from my perspective, I feel like organizing of this space went so smooth and kind of speedy manner. And I was so aware of that. I think because I'm currently organizing the conference workshop with Disability Justice Collective folks. The group is comprised of those who with physical, cognitive, mental, emotional disabilities, and those who experience chronic illness, fatigue, and pain. So organizing with disability-centered space is very opposite of speedy and smooth, but super messy and just beautiful mixture of brilliantness and wisdoms, and it's beautiful and amazing. But just being in those two spaces, like organizing in academia and organizing in disability-centered space, kind of informed this talk. So I'm talking from these two spaces I put myself in. And I will refer a lot to disability activism and organizing in this talk. And when I talk about it, my perspective is coming from my involvement in different disability-centered organizing and activism, but particularly coming from my involvement in disability justice movement. And disability justice is organized by those who felt left or marginalized in different activist communities. So the disability justice movement is led by people of color with different kind of disabilities, mental illnesses, cognitive, sensory, physical, chronic illness. And most of them identified as queer or transgendered, poor, formerly or currently homeless, formerly incarcerated in jails and nursing home, and also formerly sex workers. So my point is that when I talk about disability activism and disability-centered organizing, I'm also talking about the organizing which address multiple social injustices. So not just ableism, but I'm talking about racism and all that isms you can think of. So what I'm trying to talk today is how our lives and well-beings are shaped by the neoliberal academia, and also layers analysis with disability studies and activism perspectives. And by doing so, I want to encourage us to engage in reflexive thinking of that as much as we are oppressed and victimized by the neoliberal academia, what does it mean that we also participate in it and maybe perpetuate such ideology? And finally, I'm gonna touch on how we can resist or go by or live in this neoliberal academia. And I'll do so by discussing disability-centered activism and talking about more careful or mindful, for the lack of better word, community and collective care. So it's a lot to cover in 40 minutes, but luckily Sean provides plenty of time for us to engage in dialogue and a conversation. So I'm hoping to utilize the time to build the resource together, because we are all in this together and you are all expert about this experience as well. And as I start this conversation, I want to say that my discussion is built from my experience in US academia. But of course, the issue of neoliberal academia is definitely not unique only to US, it's happening all over. And also English is not my native language, so if you need a clarification, just send me the sign and I'll clarify what I said. So what are the neoliberalism and neoliberal academia? The understanding of neoliberalism I'm using for this talk is reflecting works by Harvey, Brown, Davies, Bancel, and more. And some argues that neoliberalism is a political philosophy which pushes economic liberalization, free trade and open market, privatization, deregulation, and enhancing the role of the private sector in the society. Or in the simple words, it is the economization of every aspect of our lives. So neoliberalism is not just a political and economical structure, but also an ideology that shapes the social virtues and also shapes our beliefs and desires as well as our mind body, like our behavior. And under the neoliberalism, aggressive privatization obviously hit and keep hitting education sector along other public sector, where involvement of state is ever shrinking, and the task of such neoliberal state is to create and maintain a good business and financial climate instead of providing safety net for its citizens. Indeed, people are individualized and put under individual responsibility. It is now the individual responsibility to achieve or receive quality education and quality healthcare and such, to be an autonomous citizen who can enter and successfully compete in such a market-driven society. And Wendy Brown, at her talk at, I think it's Occupy University of California, I'm not sure, she characterized neoliberalization of academia as aggressive privatization. She describes how research and education is no more a public good or for the public, but it becomes another business, where school, in this case universities, are run by non-academic corporate folks, or our work is valued based on its financial value, and department and individuals are evaluated and valued based on the market value of our work, and that reflect the budget department or individual receives, under which Davis and Bansell argue that the competition among universities, department, and also each other escalates, and that undermines our collegiality and collaborative work. Research is now heavily influenced by corporate founder of the research, and teaching increasingly takes efficient delivery system to increase human capital for that larger financial growth, rather than encouraging students to be a critical thinker or do more imaginative and innovative work. Students are getting treated as a customer, and the roles of professor centered around customer satisfaction. So there is more adjunct and short-term job that very rarely provides any benefit, and hence the exploitation of the staff people becomes the norm. So the one characteristic of neoliberalism and its impact on us I want to focus in this talk is how it demands us to be hyperproductive. David and Bansell discuss, quote, the neoliberal moment in which we are each caught up depends on and generates a complex enmeshment in linear time, an end product-driven time, the end quote. Indeed, we are embedded in the era of knowledge economy, as knowledge is commodified. In such context, we often tend to focus exclusively on, or have an access only to products or outcome, and not aware of process of how the products and the outcome was achieved. And now for this talk, I want to focus on the process of how we do academia. Particularly about the ideology of hyperproductivity and how that is expected by neoliberal academia, or even becomes desire of some of us, those who are in academia, to be desired to be hyperproductive. So publish or perish is a common phrase used in academia. This sums up a valuing of certain products and productivity. Productivity is often identified as a key factor or virtue for a person to get legitimated as a valuable citizen, worker, or individual. Especially in the current state of neoliberalism, we are pressured to perform hyper-productivity. As the discourse of funding scarcity circulates and comes to shape our academic reality, we are forced to enter the competition against different schools, departments, individuals for economic survival. To survive, we are demanded to come up with unachievable amounts of products, such as publication, and successfully bringing in fundings, while we are expected to be a good teacher and do extra other services. These products are by and large, again, assessed according to their financial values and used to prove our efficiency. Further, the valuing and demanding of hyperproductivity manage not only our work time, yet also leak into the rest of our lives. For example, with the development of internet and technology, like smartphone and Wi-Fi everywhere in New York City, which ties us to email 24/7, the speed of process is even faster. As the speedy communication became the norm. It is as though the work no longer has any time restrictions, as we are expected to or held accountable to be on call for like email 24/7. And the physical and emotional impacts of such demand stuck in our mind body, which often leaves us no energy or time to engage in daily chores or relationship with others. One of the scholar quote, "I work roughly 100 hours a week, and I'm getting more and more behind as the years go by. I'm simply unable to keep up with demands on my time, let alone handle more requests. I feel extremely guilty about this, but it's important that I push folks away so that I can continue to produce research and do the work that I do." End quote. This quote demonstrates how our priority is set up based on academic agenda and the never-ending to-do list. Thus, the demands to be hyper-productive make the person feel hopeless, shame of not being successful at it, and sometimes I hear that people tell me that they feel like there is no way out, or have difficulty see life outside of academia, or use academic success as only indicator of their value and worth. In other words, while we are often managed and surveilled by neoliberal academia, we also come to internalize its ideologies. And what are the implications of such internalization? And what and who are lost from our lives as we participate to be a good citizens and reliable grad students and adjunct instructor? As our everyday life is consumed solely by academic demands, how our mind and body are neglected, or those who deserve our love and care are ignored. Thus, who supports us emotionally, physically, who does the labor to support us when we have crisis or not doing well? So another things the quote pain-free represent is how we come to believe that it is individual responsibility to fulfill such unachievable amount of work and in unsustainable hyper-productive manner. Thus, when the person fails to take up more work, it becomes her or his guilt and shame. In other words, people's productivity is understood within the framework of individual capacity, ability, or competency. The failure to keep up with such demands become her or his incapacity, which she or he is expected to fix individually and privately if she or he want to keep their space in position in academia. This is where disability studies analysis comes handy. Traditionally, disability studies and community utilized the medical and social model to understand disability. In general, the medical model of disability is widespread in our society, which understands disability as a biomedical deficit, which resides in individuals' mind, body. Thus, we need to be individually cured, fixed, or rehabilitated so we can join the society as productive citizens. And when our disability is not curable or rehabilitatable, we are all segregated and regulated in institutions such as nursing homes and prisons. Against this pervasive medical understanding of disability, in 70s and 80s in US and UK, and now different parts of the world, disability rights activists came up with the social model, under which people argue that we need to shift our gaze. Shift the gaze which sees our mind-body as a cause of our incapacity to participate in this society, but shift it to ableism society exercises. It is inaccessible built environment or narrow social norm, which is so narrow that only allows certain behavior, cognitive and mental processes, emotion and physique to exist. That causes our incapability to be part of the society. In other words, disability community removed stigma from our mind and body and praised the cause of disablement or exclusion of disabled people in the society and demanded that it is society which needs to be changed and fixed and not our mind, body, or behavior. Shifting of blame onto society by identifying its ableism allows us to see disability as something not negative, but something that based on which we can come together, unite, and fight against ableism. Similarly, capacity to fulfill demands of hyperproductivity is made to be an individual issue and responsibility to be dealt with. This means that if there is any obstacle for your productivity, you're expected to deal with it privately and often on your own alone. I'm sure that you have examples of the such labor you do in private so you can appear as a productive grad student or you look together in public spheres. These invisible labors can include finding babysitters or care provider for your aging parents, finding English editor for your work, or finding a counselor if you can afford one, and finding to do extra labors to pay for those services. Or sacrificing sleeping or eating or even bathing. And when you get sick, you quickly take pills and resume back to your work. Or even when you are having some issues with your relationship, with your family, friends, or partner, you cannot take time on it, but fix it quickly or move on quickly and put down all your emotions so you look together in the public sphere. Though these processes to be productive academia must be common in some extent, it becomes invisible and unnoticed. Or when we share it out loud, it is often seen as whining or a sign that we are unfit to academia. Since these stories are considered as background and made invisible, we often fail to recognize it as a collective and a political matter. And also, in what ways productivity is constructed socio-politically? So it's not individual issues, but it's socio-politically constructed. First of all, the expectation for such productivity, like publishing a lot, quality work, and getting funding, and teaching, and doing other services, is constructed in more profit-centered way, or based on the profit-based efficiency, and not necessarily based on humans' needs and desire or human-centered way. How hyperproductivity is constructed barely takes into account of our responsibilities outside of academia, such as your relationships with your family, friends, or other community activities that you otherwise may engage with. Also, productivity is deeply intertwined with various types of social injustices. For example, those with class and institutional privileges use such wealth and privilege to outsource their everyday chore and labor and responsibility to free up their time, to use the time to do more work and to be more productive and accumulate more privileges even further. Also, society is constructed to favor those who can fit into the social norm of certain individual mental, emotional, cognitive, and physical capacities. For example, if your physical makeup fits in the social norms, such as having 2 arms, 10 fingers, that's actually work, your body fits well with how the computer is built. That's how we are expected to produce our knowledge. And not just the physical makeup, but also virtues held by academia, such as being present, showing up to the class, participate, engage in collegiality, excludes those who cannot or have a hard time figuring out and adapting to unspoken social norms, such as how you are expected to behave, interact with each other, or express appropriate emotion in appropriate timing. While expectation of hyperproductivity is very achievable and sustainable for most of us, I want to pay close attention on the impacts of such demands from disability perspectives and its impact on disabled people. So we see like, oh, we are all victims, but what do we mean by all? The academia we participate has a set of prerequisites for anyone in order to enter it. And one of the fundamental prerequisites is being a productive, rational, logical, and autonomous individual. And has been true even before the neoliberal take over the academia. Academia historically and still contemporary excludes disabled people. And this neoliberal academia amplifies the difficulties disabled people face. As I have mentioned already, we all individually and privately expected to deal with our own needs in order to appear as a productive grad students in the public. In the academia, which is often critiqued for being ableist, disabled students and faculties go through the business of accommodation often individually and privately by proving our incapabilities in order to achieve reasonable accommodation. When what we are really doing is compensating for the shortcoming of disableist academia, disability rights activists would argue that it is inaccessible universities, buildings, and a curriculum that prevent disabled people from learning and teaching. Thus, the process of accommodation can be largely avoided if the school utilizes universal design and universal instructional design. And also, how about unaccommodatable accommodation? The Margaret Price, who is a MAD activist and MAD studies scholars, teaches us that, she said, quote, "We are accustomed to think of classroom accommodations in terms of measurable steps that helps, quote, level the playing field, quote, such as note takers, extra time on exam, or having an ASL interpreter. But what accommodation can be offered for the students who is earnestly participating, but in ways that do not fall into usually rationalist pattern of classroom discussions and activities? Although the notion of a classroom discussion implies that it is open to all perspectives, this setting is in fact controlled by rigid expectations. Students taking part in the discussion are expected to demonstrate their knowledge of the topic at hand, raise relevant questions, and establish themselves as significant but not overly dominant voices in a crowd of at least 15 or usually many more other people. These expectations may or may not be communicated directly," end quote. So indeed, our society, including academia, is filled with unwritten and subtle rules. Though we often acknowledge more obvious accommodation needs, such as wheelchair accessible bathroom, of course, like acknowledging is different from having such accommodation, but we are often unaware of accommodation for such unwritten and subtle rules. And the violation of such unwritten and subtle rules are rarely tolerated. Here, I want us to ask ourselves reflexively or critically that as much as we are victimized and oppressed and exploited by the neoliberal academia, what are the impacts or implications of our participation in such academia? What are the impacts on those who are excluded from the academia? Our participation in academia makes us holders of educational privilege and consequently ties us with social responsibilities. What do we do with such privileges and responsibilities? So, going back to the beginning of this talk, I was sharing that how I'm often struck by such a different experience I get from organizing within the academia or even mainstream activism movement and organizing within the disability-centered organizations. So thinking about my experience in both spheres, in some, I feel like the difference between these two spaces about how they organize is one different degree of commitment to make the space or movement accessible for all, which takes creativity, imagination, labor, and diversifying of our agenda and priority. And the second point is how we practice or not practice a careful collective and community care. So as we may have experienced academia, like how academia organized for conference and all that already, so I'm gonna just jump into how disability-centered organizing look like, or that I've been part of look like. So oftentimes, when we have a workshop, like when we try to organize workshop for activist or academic conference, we have meetings to come up with plan for the workshop. But prior to even that kind of meeting, we spend, so before the prior to even to the meeting, we spend the time to acknowledge each other's accessible needs and desire. So it's not just the needs, but desire, so we can bring entire part of who we are into the space and come up with ways to actualize them collectively. We take plenty of time to discuss over emails, phone, face-to-face, Facebook messaging, whatever works, about what are the physical, emotional, cognitive support we can offer for each other. So not only what we need, but what we can offer for each other. How can we organize distance participation of the meeting for those who cannot be in the physical space together, maybe due to the pollution of the city and chemical sensitivity, or because face-to-face meeting is just too much. Also, we buddy up to navigate our ways to the meeting spot, and we discuss what are the desirable working style for each other, how slow we want to move, and when will be a good time to meet in conjunction with the care provider's schedules, and also considering how our energy changes throughout the day. Even with such perfect plan, there is always last-minute drop with unexpected migraine, energy drops, or trouble with care provider schedules. Many in disability community calls it creep time, which reflects that the fact it requires some of us to take double or triple amount of time to travel due to the broken New York City transportation system, and also we need to be flexible with each other and for each other. Also, we spend a good amount of meeting time to check in with each other for real and to get grounded, as these meetings are not only a space for task-based conversation, but also functions as social support space. It is always collective, creative, and imaginative work to move with and organize with disability communities. And this is the only way for us to have such sustainable activism and organizing. I don't want you to think that this is disability-specific tactic or nothing to do with you, but I want you to see what I shared is not our mere accessible needs, but more about a commitment to work collectively in a more genuine and sustainable way. Feminists of color, womanists, transnational feminists all taught us the importance of acknowledging differences we embody, different standpoint each of us is situated. Only with such recognition we can figure out ways to unite and share an agenda together. We are all different from each other one way or the other, and you may find worthwhile to take some time to know each other, connect with each other, learning each other's work ethics and style to figure out ways to collaborate together. And this leads us to the last part of this talk, which is on, so how can we resist neoliberal academia and how we just live everyday life in under neoliberal academia? And there have been a number of protests by the students against neoliberal academia already, and many of you were or are part of it already, and you know this already. You guys are expert of that, so I'm not gonna go over that strategy of resistance and so. But reflecting what I have just discussed, I just want to raise 2 points. The one is thinking about this massive macro level resistance and protest and movement, the importance of diversifying its strategy and agenda to make it truly inclusive to all, which means being imaginative and creative and commit to connect with each other in deeper level and attend each other's needs and desires. When we engage in massive or macro transformative work, sometimes we often prioritize exclusively work on direct action. But how can we make direct action more inclusive and accessible to different kinds of people? And also we need to make sure that there are various entry points, not just direct action. The various entry points for different people who have different availability, so who will never gonna make it to the direct action. We engage in activism and movements to change the status quo and to build a better society. It is critical then what kind of resistance and protest we carry on, as it tells what kind of society we are creating. Fully inclusive and accessible society will never born out of exclusive and inaccessible movements. So the second point, I want to talk about community and collective care, which I see as a fundamental micro resistance, or maybe not so micro. As much as we need to work for radical and fundamental transformation, I don't want to dismiss realities of our everyday life. And how do we treat ourselves and others while we work to change the society? As we are exploited by the academia, our mind bodies are exhausted, injured, holds a lot of trauma and stress. Also, when we are busy and exhausted from academic work, not only our care for ourselves becomes secondary or tertiary concerns, but we are also in short of time and energy to check in with or care for those who are important to us. Community and collective care are a way for us to keep ourselves sustainable physically and emotionally. Particularly, community care is critical, not only for our survival, but also it is a way to resist neoliberal academia as well. It is a way to break individualization that neoliberal endorse on us. And it is a way to nurture democracy or nurture the desire to work together and work for democracy. So in disability justice movement, we value interdependence and not independence, but interdependence, which has been practiced all over the world already. But we acknowledge that and hold on to the notion of interdependence because it reminds us that none of us are truly independent, as much as capitalists want us to be or as much as we want to believe, but we need each other to depend on. And we need each other to heal and resist the oppressive condition we live under today. The practicing of interdependence. So I hear many people start talking about interdependence and dependence, but talking about it and practicing it is very different things. And I've been working interdependent care collective with my friends for years and years, and it's very hard. Because everybody's needs are different. My need is different from yours, and your need is different from hers. So it becomes a challenge, great kind of juicy challenge, to meet everybody's need without making anyone feel like their labor is exploited or exhausted. It is a journey and a practice I believe that we all benefit from, and we need to do it in careful way so you're not exhausting or exploiting anyone. So to end this talk, I want to end this with a quote from my friend Yashna Padamsi. She's a healing activist, healing justice activist, and healer. She said, "If your liberation is wrapped up with mine, for me, that means that it matters how you feel and what you are feeling. Your well-being is our liberation, and I would hope that you would say the same." Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's
Oh my God.
great. I'm personally stunned because I'm still thinking about everything that you said. It was amazing. Questions, comments, discussion.
Yes.
Your talk was wonderful.
Thank you.
And beautifully organized.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh.
Absolutely beautiful. So don't worry about your English. Your English is much better than our Japanese. As you were speaking, I was thinking of a process I've seen going on in my department at Stony Brook, where I'm writing my dissertation, which happens to be in Hispanic literature. The professors over the course of the past 5 years have felt so much pressure to publish or perish, and Stony Brook has had certain economic issues, which CUNY knows also, that successively every year there's been less and less time spent between the professors and the students. Mm-hmm. It got to a point it produced a kind of rebellion in the department. That's less interesting. What's more interesting is to watch how when the professors spend less time with the students, lo and behold, the ratio of students who get good jobs after the degree plunges. And I do not think it is accidental that in the past 3 years, where you've really seen this, everything that you were describing, I thought, well, you must have come to SUNY Stony Brook. You must be describing my university. But to make it short, we went from a rating of being the 15th highest rated Hispanic literature department in the country, now down to 26, because the students are not feeling any guidance from their mentors. I myself changed mentors. I'm a better one now, but the fact is, we are not feeling that they're giving us help. And when you spoke about competition, you sent the arrow right to the mark, because one feeling that I know I had with my first mentor, the reason that I changed him, was that we were competing for the same jobs. And he was not telling me about certain offerings, and I later found myself next to him in an interview. Wow. For the same job at NYU to talk about neoliberal institutions. So you hit the nail on the head, and I would just wonder if you have any thoughts about this idea of when your mentor becomes your competitor. You know, because traditionally the person who helps you, who directs your PhD thesis is supposed to help you, and yet more and more in Stony Brook we're hearing this argument in every department, from math to literature, my mentor isn't helping me because he's competing for the same jobs I am.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's all right. Yeah. And please respond among each other. I'm sure you have better say than hers. And the one thing I thought was it's kind of struck, like you said, like you felt like I'm talking about your schools, and that's a similar reaction I get from different universities, not just SUNY, but even when me, Rachel, and Michelle Billis did a workshop about neoliberal academia, and it's an international conference, and I was really surprised how people from all over the world talking in the same language. There is a slight difference whether your country is like US or middle class countries such as South Africa, but still people are talking in a similar language, and that is kind of proving how neoliberalism is really working in kind of empire globalizing levels. And yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of eating us alive. But the interesting thing is it defeats itself. Because, you know, the aim for the department should be that we should all be getting these fantastic placements, and yet the competition is destroying that. So it's kind of ironic, you know. Thank you for your talk. Sorry.
And maybe someone, you.
Can I ask a question? You said a couple of phrases and I hadn't heard of them before. One was universal design and one was universal instructional design. Can you, what?
Oh, so universal design is kind of universal design. The like design of like building or design of the tools or equipment you can use that is built in a way that is accessible for larger population, like even to many disabled people. And universal instructional design is about teaching style, or how can we make our curriculum and teaching more accessible, because oftentimes we're taught how to teach to the certain population, right? So like I'm sure all of us do certain things a different way to try to accommodate on our classroom. So like for example, when I give exam, I give first 5 minutes for them to just do it on their own, and I read questions out loud for the students who learn better by listening, and who's gonna do horribly otherwise by just reading it. So or providing both PowerPoint, but say everything on a PowerPoint, audio describe it. Because some students learn from more listening, and some students learn by looking at it, and so are the professor, right? Some professors are better at more face-to-face communication, and some students are better with email communication. So the universal design is how can we make the classroom, like how to build the original curriculum that is more accessible to all. So the most students don't even need to go to ask for accommodations, because that just accommodated different runners to begin with, but without making professor to do like extra work, because all the baseline is built in accessible way. Yeah.
I sort of have a follow-up to that. So I was wondering if you could recommend any resources for universal instructional design, which sounds really interesting to me. But the one thing that it also brings to mind is I'm wary about things like MOOCs, like being a version of universal instructional design, even though we know, not everyone has access to the internet, to a computer, but it seems like there's a danger there that could be offered as a solution, as a version of universal instructional design. And then I just had one term that I missed the definition of, a MAD studies activist. What is MAD studies?
So the first thing, like universal design and universal instructional design is kind of common term among disability service field in the world. So if you Google it, it's everywhere. So it's like you're talking about gender and sexuality or something. It's just a common terminology and ideology we use. So I think it's easy to find it. And of course, there have been a lot of critique and revision about universal design, because what do you mean by universal when every one of us is different? So there are critique to it too, but I feel like many people don't even know about it, or buildings are not built in universal design way, or curriculum are not built in universal instructional curriculum way. So even though there is a critique, still I feel we are largely benefit from it by knowing about it and implementing it. And also, if the CUNY all department just do it at once, all the professor who comes later don't need to do it individually, right? Because there is a template and stuff like that already. So it's kind of everywhere. But also this book by Margaret Price, Mad at School. It's really helpful, and she gives a lot of practical examples of what you can do.
Okay.
But Mad studies or Mad activism is, you might know better than I do. But it's like activism by those people who might identify as having mental disabilities or mental illness. So it's happening a lot in Canada and the US and elsewhere. So some people work against police brutality against people with mental illness or mental disabilities, or pharmaceutical company and over medicalization or under diagnosis and such and such. And MAD studies is kind of like disability studies, but specifically about psychiatric mental illness, mental disabilities. And there are great articles written about ableism and saneism under Disability Studies Quarterly. So that talks a lot about MAD studies too.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to add, Rachel?
No, I guess only just, I don't know, was it the word MAD that made you ask? Could you?
I
not
wasn't familiar with that acronym, yeah.
Yeah,
Is it an acronym?
No.
No, it's MAD. You're MAD.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, it's like a reappropriated.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
Got it now.
It's like a creep hop or like trying to reclaim the word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that reclamation it doesn't go without, critique, because of all the connections that are often made, problematic connections between anger and violence and madness. So within activist and scholarly circles around madness, there's a little bit of contention around the term. But yeah, it's a reclamation.
Question for you comes to it. So Akemi and I are in the same year, probably graduating at the same time. And I don't know about you, but it feels like this is a particular moment where I'm just so acutely aware of all of the ways in which the academy is and has been neoliberalized, and facing some very real issues that will come up in terms of my qualifications as a scholar, and what makes me a desirable applicant or what makes me an undesirable applicant. And so I was wondering sort of how you've been thinking about your own situation or approaching that in a way that takes into consideration the critique, but also the reality of needing to survive and wanting to be inside the academy, if that's what you're choosing.
Yeah, that's why towards the end of the talk, when we talk about how we can resist or live under such circumstances, I didn't just stop with the more macro level fundamental transformational work, because many people say activism, let's destroy that. But it's gonna take, I don't know how long to destroy neoliberal academia. Like many people said the neoliberal academia is in us already and we can't destroy it, but we gotta find a way to minimize it or contain it. That's why I talked about community and collective care, because we still gotta keep living under this situation for tomorrow and today and day after tomorrow. I can't just say fuck it and walk away, especially I get visa from going to school. So if I say fuck it, I get kicked out of this country as well. So that's why I talk about collective and community care, and also I ask many questions in this talk that yes, we are victimized and oppressed and exploited, but let's not stop there, because we are just talking only one layer of impact of neoliberalism and what is our responsibility to participate in it and what kind of privilege we are given and what kind of power we are given. So yes, we gotta just keep doing our everyday task and all that. But how we do it, I think, is in our control more so. So I wanted to more focus on process. So how can we do it in more careful or mindful way? So it's not gonna destroy you, or it's not gonna destroy people who are important to you, right? So it's not just about you, but your family, your friends, and your communities. So I think like how we do it is a place where we can be more mindful and kind of do micro resistance. Yeah.
Thanks so much. I don't know if you were done with answering that.
Does anybody want to add to her stuff? What else do you do?
Well, one of the things I was thinking about was that one of the successes, I guess you could say, of neoliberalism is its ubiquity, and that it is everywhere, so it is nowhere that we can visibly see, right?
Yeah.
Like fish in water.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was trying to think, and this is just points to my youth in some ways, of reimagining or understanding what it looked like before it came around as a useful tool, at least to inform our consciousness about what it is that has changed and why it isn't problematic. Because you'd hear a lot of people express a lot of the consequences and the issues that are coming up, but not in such a way that is a critique of them, more of a sort of, let's just figure out how to manage it kind of idea.
That makes me think of a conversation you and I had, Ali, right, about the different kind of, because you've experienced a lot of different universities, right, in different countries, and the different cultures, you know, of like community that are possible. So I'm wondering if it's just not just looking back in time, but also looking across.
Well, I don't know. I was kind of thinking that in regular academia, this interdependence notion is definitely something we have to learn. You know, but I was just thinking that I just know one example of one situation in which we were working in interdependence kind of way. In Spain, one day a professor, brilliant one, he came to the meeting and said, "Okay, I have discovered something. The reviews have a formula, so you just need to know how questions to answer in order to write a paper. You don't need to be brilliant. You just need to get a subject and say 5 things about it. So what we're going to do now is every meeting we are going to write one paper for publishing. Every time we meet. And we start to do that. He managed a formula, and the meetings were about answering these points. And then the best of us. Sorry, my English is terrible. The one that was the best on writing just rewrote the meeting like an inform of the meeting, and that was a paper that was accepted.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was true, and we were also rotating the names because every paper, when there's more than 3 authors, it is less the value of the paper.
Right.
So one paper, every paper just with 3 authors, and rotating with who's the first, the second, the third. And yeah, sometimes you were working in a paper that you are not the author, but yeah, you get another 3, so it's okay. So that was a way of organization, and I mean, we were surviving, everybody got publications, and yeah, it was a way of resistance or to survive, but that's the only way I know. I mean, I haven't seen another thing. What I usually see is people doing the critique, but this liberalism in academia sometimes seems to be like people, like if criticism would be the opposite to proposing. Just pointing out with hostility, but not proposing a way to overcome that. So that's something very risky that I see in the neoliberalism, that is turning our criticism into some kind of not active criticism.
Right.
But I don't know. I don't know if I say something. Yeah.
That's I think a really good point. Sometimes even critique become this hot, like fashionable thing that it looks attractive, and it's kind of taken into the market back again, right? And then like sometimes we don't have much solution to tell, and yeah. And yeah, it's definitely important to see it in across country, like how it's happening. So not just past and now, but across, but at the same time, without losing the difference, right? Without flattening, inflating all those differences, like how neoliberalism hit different countries in different ways. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's related, but it might take us somewhere else. I don't know. But like in like thinking about how to think and act more collectively and independently, personally, like I'm still struggling to ask for help when I need help. And I also like found really, like there was a comment that you made about how to be interdependent without making people who are more fully able-bodied have them feel like exploited by it, because like there are a lot of things that I can't like give back. So I don't know, like if it's always the same person opening the door or carrying the bags or running for the grocery stores and whatever, the way that we divide up labor, I just feel like I still, even though I tell myself that I should not feel bad for not being able to do something, like I still kind of feel like I'm perceived as lazy or like, I don't know. Yeah, especially because like my disability isn't as visible all the time. So I don't know if other people have experiences with that or like being on the other end of that. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely partially how we internalize ableism, right? Like we have to be independent, we can't ask for help, we gotta provide help. So that's one thing, and I do a lot of interdependent care collective work more outside of academia, and that is definitely the question I always discuss. And the privilege I have is I talk to many older disability justice activists who's been doing that for their lives, so they tells me some advices. So there is I see a lot of limit of interdependent community or collective care in a way too, because so the way me and my friends do is make sure we have a bigger group. So the bigger the needs are, we need to build capacity as well. So like one example, my friends needs help in the morning and the night to get out of the bed and transfer from bed to her wheelchair and take shower and all that. So her friends, we rotate every night. So I go there like every Wednesday, now every other Wednesdays, to help her to take shower and move her from shower chair to her wheelchair and wheelchair to her bed and all that. And in exchange, she provides tremendous emotional care for us, like checking in, how's my day goes. So we talk about how we can equalize emotional care and physical care. And also she does a lot of English editing of my work. So that's how we kind of barter our labor. And again, we try not to privilege one labor with more value than the other. We say labor is labor, so we are not going to value different labor differently. But then that kind of, so she has many friends, so she built capacity, community capacity in a way. But then question is, how about the people who cannot socialize and who don't have social capital as much as she does? And also, when I stepped out to be my friend's care provider when the Hurricane Sandy hit, there was more needs than the capacity we have. And the friends of mine who's been doing this forever, who has been both care receiver side and provider side, said, he says sometimes if community is exhausted and it's kind of, the community is falling because of this intense needs, maybe sometimes what we need is, okay, we have no choice, so we have to depend on the state, meaning you gotta go to group home or nursing home for now. but we recoup together and we build capacity even more, and we promise you to get you out there as soon as possible. So sometimes the community care, I see there is a limit if I see it in more macro level, including those who have more quote unquote severe kinds of disability whose needs is just so difficult to cover by community. But that's why we have a state, right? The state Medicaid and Medicare are there for that reason. And of course it's collapsing under neoliberalism. It's so scary. So yeah, there are different ways we've been doing already in the disability justice community, and I can talk more about it. Definitely, yeah. Yes.
It makes me think about. I'm working on the links between trans issues, transgender, transsexual, and disability issue, and it makes me think how I don't know in United States because I'm from Quebec, Canada, but there is not very important link between both community, the community of disabled people and the community of trans people. In fact, there is a lot of hierarchy, and people in trans community don't want to be associated with disabled people, and disabled people think about their body issue as everything except sex and gender kind of way, and don't want to be associated with trans stuff. So, but it strikes me when you talk, and thank you very much for your talk, it was amazing, how they face very often the same kind of problem, not on long term, but sometimes on long term for trans people, because when you transition, you need to invest a lot of time, a lot of medical care. When you got surgery, this is long time for recovery and convalescence and etc. And so it makes me think that there should be more link between the disabled community and the trans community, because the disabled condition or the incapacity of trans people are more punctual in their life. Sometimes it's long-term effect, but it's more punctual. But at some point in their life, they need a lot of medical help or support from community. So it could be an association fruitful, I think. But people in both community don't want to think about this help.
Right. I see that a lot. So thank you for bringing that up. And there are more scholars and activists who talk about transgenderness and disability together. So I feel there is a little more hope now that how frequently I encounter such work. But I see a lot of connection between trans community and disability community, and there are many disabled trans people, right? So the community cannot be separated.
Yeah.
Like when I give a workshop about disability justice at the Trans Justice School at Audrey Road Project in New York City, we shared like how much similarities, not just the transition, but like how our identity is determined based on the physical biological makeup, right? And how we are pathologized in like mind and body and in such way. So yeah, I totally agree. And it's not just a trans disability community, but even race disability community, or don't want to identify or associate with each other. So I see many disabled people feel excluded from racial communities, and they don't want to associate with disability or incapability because that's how they're stigmatized. That's ableism is used for racist agenda in the past and other social injustices. So that sometimes become a difficulty for us to come together and similar things in disability, more mainstream disability community, how they don't want to talk about class or race or gender or sexuality. It's very complex and not so complex at the same time. Like that's where disability justice came from. Disability justice is so the two of the leaders of disability justice is trans men with disabilities, and many leaders of disability justice are people of color with disabilities or queer people with disability. And disability justice started because they didn't find their racial community as home or queer community as home, and disability community is not home either. So we gotta come up with something new. So disability justice is where I see the activism, where more than two communities come together, and I see more work even in academic to connect both things together. And I'm happy to give you some reference of who you can look up to. Yeah. But thank you so much for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yes, if I could just jump along with that, because I think the thing for me, I mean, this was so incredible for so many reasons, but on the one hand, right, for me, well, I step back, right? So the notion of intersectionality, right, which like as, right, academics, politically engaged, socially engaged academics, activists, organizers, right, like we're always trying to think intersectionally, right? And I was thinking coming in today, and then your talk affirmed this, and also like I was suggesting in my intro, our email exchanges of friends, right? Because at first I didn't even have accessibility notes on the flyers, I just didn't even know that, right? And so Akemi pointed out I changed that, which was already an important, takeaway from the talk. But I was thinking, right? So I'm pretty good at centering queer, right, experiences. I'm getting better, right, at race, class, trans issues, and I'm starting to really learn more about indigeneity as a category, but the disability justice angle, right, is something that really I'm only coming to now, right? And I don't think I'm alone in that, right? And so it seems strange in a way, we're talking about hierarchies and working against hierarchies, but at the same time there seems to be a hierarchy in intersectionality, right? And I was thinking, so there's a lot to learn, right, at the Neoliberal Academy, but I think the other part of it is that I think this was also raised by the question of MOOCs, right? We're at a time, right, where the academy, whatever, across the globe, right, we're in crisis, right? The academy is no different, and so there's all these prescriptions of how to change, right? And it's occurring to me now that we need to be centering, right, disability in those prescriptions, and I don't think for the most part we are, right? And so that actually seems, and I'm teaching, for instance, a course in critical university studies this semester, and I've talked a little bit about, mental disabilities, but I realized I do more, but also just in terms of how we're going to move forward and change academia, what I was talking about, we could be leaving whole communities behind at the same time that historically, right, as you mentioned, we've left whole communities behind, including communities of people with disabilities, right? So I don't know, I guess I'm not really asking a question, but making a statement, right? And I guess the other thing I just add on and then I'll wrap up is the way that in the first instance you were talking about disability studies, but in the second instance, the way that in some ways disability studies is uniquely capable of addressing some of the problematics, right? In terms of the deficits, the so-called deficits that individual people have, right? That it's up to us to fix, right? But in actuality, it's up to society to fix, right? Which seems to actually be quite a generative way, I think, of thinking about just changing the Neoliberal Academy altogether.
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I think one of the many reasons why disability is often left behind is like people sometimes don't want to associate with it. Like ableism has been used for like agenda of racism, sexism, heterosexism, and transphobia and everything. And also another thing I can think is because disability rights move really fast. So we gotta make a change. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. But disability justice, we intentionally moving slowly, so we are not gonna leave anyone behind. That's why I often don't bring disability justice into academia. Even today's talk, I try not to talk as much. I just try to give you a brief description of where I'm coming from, but I try not to talk in academia because in the history, academia is good at appropriating things from activism and community, and disability studies actually 1 year used disability justice as a conference topic, and disability community and activists become so angry about that because academia is so good at appropriating it, but without challenging their own privilege, right? Without reflecting who they are, but just take something looks great from community and just take it and chew it and spit it away. And it happens so fast. So I very conscious and try to be careful how much to share. But same time, I feel like you're gonna figure out anyway. But like I want, and it's not who am I to be the gatekeeper? But if I'm gonna bring up disability justice, I also pair it with how academia in the history really destroyed or appropriated and did horrible things to many great activism in the community, and we gotta be mindful about that. And disability studies talks a lot about social model and medical model, so maybe that's where you might want to look into.
I wanted to jump on what you were saying, and something I've been thinking about since the beginning of your talk, because you were talking about the biomedical model of disability and then the social model. And I was wondering if you think that or what you think about the social model of disability having something specific, or what lessons can we really dig into to apply to the problems of neoliberalism in the academy, which make people sick, which make academics sick. So really moving from it's my problem to it's our problem. Do you think there are lessons to be learned from the social model specifically that could be applied to deal with this very horrible issue that so many academics I know go through?
Yeah, so I think one thing is acknowledging that it's not individual responsibility and burden. Like as I was saying, oftentimes we see it as individual issues. We have to privately deal with it. Like if I'm not publishing as much, it's something wrong with me. Like I'm a failure or something. So the one thing the social model teaches us, it's society that needs to be changed, so it's socially constructed. It's not something resides in our body it's not about our ability or capacity. It's more about how the desire for such a product and a desire for such productivity or such social norm are created by society. So we kind of shift the responsibility from individuals to the societies and kind of shift our gaze of not changing our capacities or who we are, but how can we change the society? And of course, it's much easier to blame yourself than realizing it is society and we need to change the society because it takes who knows how long. But that shift of the gaze is the one thing that it's not you to blame, but it's more society that constructs such ideology and we internalize it. And also in that way, we don't need to hide whatever we do privately as a shame or private things without afraiding like, oh, I'm whining too much, or maybe I'm just not meant to be in academia. But sharing of that and acknowledging that socially constructed, it's not about our individual capacities. Also, I think that really helps us, and it helped disability community to unite. Because before, many disabled people didn't want to identify with each other because we thought the stigma was on us, on our body. So something wrong with me, so disability is something negative, I shouldn't connect with other disabled people. But shifting the gaze said, it's nothing wrong with us, but it's society kind of make us come together and unite together and fight against ableism in the society. So I think just shifting the understanding might help us to come together, share the experience, and unite and organize together.
Do you think that there are also strategies specific? I mean, because at some point, you know, somebody convinced society that it wasn't just because you have a particular disability that it's all your fault. So are there specific strategies, do you think, that could also, you know, because it's not going to be easy to convince anyone in the academy that this is the academy's problem specifically, and it's not about, you know, individuals just not being able to hack it. So I'm not expecting you to say, you know, give me a list, but I'm just wondering if there are very specific strategies in terms of activism or, you know, I don't know, different kinds of strategies to actually convince the people who make the decisions that this is an issue that actually needs to be addressed, because that's something that eventually happened with disability issues. So
I think that's something the experts are in this space. Besides, like Patrick was like really involved in Occupy CUNY and worked for that.
Yeah, I don't
Tell us something about that.
I don't know what to say about Occupy CUNY. It was well, I guess what I can say about Occupy CUNY was that I felt like really like burnt out and like disillusioned after things started slowing down, and I felt that way since then, and I've been thinking about it actually as like me, like, oh gosh, like, what's wrong with me, and yeah, I don't know about particular strategies, but there was something wonderful like during the time when we were having those protests and having those GAs of, you know, of being able to share like with people and have the common goals that we wanted and to work on them together. That was really great. And then for lots of reasons things changed, but yeah.
I think that was, there's a person at the moment called Melissa who's doing her PhD in anthropology around Occupy. And that's a recurring theme. She's coming out of her interviews is people feeling depressed now after being involved. What both of you made me think of was one strategy. It's not specific. It's like a dynamic. It's like just making stuff public. Private experiences public. So that's about that's why I love your stuff so much, Akemi, because it kind of starts with building a community that, you know, where we feel okay to make stuff public, which we can do just by like smiling at each other in the hallway, you know, that we can start on these very, very micro levels. And then once these private experiences, the feminist movement was really big on this too, right? Once we lift up those private experiences and can talk about them, and then other people would like their mind too, and that's when we can start to get more of a social and political lens on things. I'm thinking specifically actually about a friend of ours and colleague who just got deported last week after being terminated from our program under really unjust circumstances, and lifting up her experiences was really, really tricky to do, because it also lifted up a lot of fears from people in the program, and we really spoke against some really powerful figures. And we had to fight all the way through the system here, and it was fucked up and awful, and I learned a lot about institutions totally designed to protect the powerful. But that experience, I think, did create like a slightly more openness about our fears. And I feel like even though not everyone in the program now knows of Amber, there's something about her ghost being around that has created a little bit of a culture shift in terms of the unrest. And people just seem to be talking at least, right? But it's funny that it's come up now, because before, when I was thinking about privilege and complicity, I was thinking about my enormous temptation at the moment to like retreat and hide away, and I've been wrestling with that because I feel like as we move through the program and through institutions, and we build up like a more, I guess, wisdom, dare I say, even though I'm so very young, about these things, often it's when you feel poisoned and burnt out and realise how toxic spaces are and abusive they are, and it can be easy just to just be like, fuck, I'm just gonna get out of here, like build strength, maybe build strength and like come back. but at the moment I'm really trying to figure out how to resist doing that. And stick around so that stories keep being told and ghosts keep being present. So I think that's one. I keep meaning actually, Amber's still got a mailbox in our program, I keep meaning to put some flowers in it so that at least we can have some physical memory of her. So I think there are lots of little things we can do.
Yeah, and also I'm thinking about sustainability, right? That's what healing justice and disability justice is talking about. Even mainstream activism, not just academia, we don't think about sustainability. Like people go action all the time, working 12 hours straight, and yeah, we get burned out at some point and movement stops. And I feel like movement can go slow. That's another thing, the sense of urgency. Like we have to do it now or we're gonna lose opportunity. That kind of sense of urgency, that's very true. But how can we kind of resist it in a way so we can have more authentic relationships? So when things fall, still we have the connection with each other, and even though it's scary, like how much crap is going on, it's scary, but at least knowing we have each other and we have a number. So we won't go into this place of depression, but more like a care and a love and collective number. And that's why I wanted to end with community care and because community care gives more sustainability among us too. And I think movement is gonna take years. So maybe Occupy CUNY looks quiet now, but who knows what's gonna happen in the future too, because we started the seeds. We have some connection. We know people from Occupy CUNY. So it might look quiet now, but who knows what's gonna blossom from that too.
And just to note, we can keep going on for as long as we want, but the food's gonna go. Actually, so if you want anything, take it now. Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, keep on it.
Yes.
All right, we can leave stuff. I keep forgetting. Keep on plastic.
I teach. This is amazing.